las escuelas públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Gracias. Due to the contingencies of the COVID-19 public health pandemic, this meeting is being conducted virtually. Central Services Building is closed to the public. However, the board members are participating at the Central Service Building in the auditorium. In order to allow for as much public participation as possible, this meeting is being broadcast on radio station WYMS 88.9 FM and is live streamed on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, and the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we move to our agenda, the chair will ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of the following members of the MPS community. Colette Krantz, a retired payroll employee. James Francis, a retired teacher from Clark Street School. Ann Gallagher, a retired teacher at Gensland School. Nemanta Hambright, a student at Alliance High School. Mike Hibben, a retired teacher at Fritchie Middle School. Mary Ellen McCormick Mervis, a retired teacher at Reagan High School. Isaac Rivera Ramos, a student at Allen Field School. Bolivia Roberts, a school safety assistant at Coggle School. And Errol Young, a retired building service helper at Bradley Tech. Let's have a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll now move on to the items of the business of our agenda. As is customary, no public testimony is taken at board meetings. For our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting esbmilwaukee.k12.wi.us. Now let us begin, Madam Secretary. What is our first item of business?
The first item of business on tonight's agenda is the awards and commendations, the Excellence in Education Award.
Each month, the Board of School Directors recognizes an outstanding school, student, staff member, parent, or community member for a display of excellence, achievement, or innovation that may serve as an example to our schools and our entire community. This month, the Milwaukee Board of School Directors is proud to posthumously present the Excellence in Education Award to Colleen Charity Krajcek. A proud and dedicated teacher, Colleen Krajcek devoted her MPS career to students at Clark Street School for 20 years. Co-workers and former students remember her as an excellent and effective teacher who was humble, passionate, calm, and supportive of her students. Colleen spent countless hours preparing unique and interesting lessons and making certain that her classroom was a warm and inviting learning environment, often volunteering her beloved husband, Ron, to assist in various projects. She loved all the children she came in contact with and went above and beyond to find creative ways to make sure they were fully prepared for the next academic challenge in their lives. Colleen was a true champion of students and enjoyed making genuine connections with families. Early in her career in education and before becoming an MPS employee, Colleen pursued her love of working with children at the Sherman Park Preschool as an aide, teacher, and administrator. While raising her 5 children, she earned her degree at UW-Milwaukee in early childhood education, eventually receiving her master's degree. Teaching and helping children learn was a passion of her life. Colleen and her husband, Ron, adored and cared for 15 foster babies while raising their own children. Her joy in life was being a number one fan of her children and grandchildren, and never missed watching them play, compete, or perform. Colleen was also an unofficial Sheevel Knievel of the Brew City Bruisers, a popular Milwaukee roller derby club. The Milwaukee Board of School Directors honors Colleen Charity Karchek for dedication, outstanding leadership, and commitment to excellence on behalf of the students of the Milwaukee Public Schools. At this time, I would ask Colleen's family to please come on stage to receive an award. Dr. Posley, will you please do the honors? Thank you. Madam, yes?
Go ahead.
Madam Secretary, what is the next item of business?
Mr. Chair?
Oh,
we
excuse
would
me.
ask for a few words from the family.
My mistake. Please go ahead.
President Peterson, Board of Directors, and Superintendent Posley, thank you. Thank you very much from our family. My wife would be extremely embarrassed for being called out in public, but she would also be extremely proud for the recognition for what she had done. Who is this mysterious Mrs. Krachek? There's a little story that she told. She had a young fellow in one of her classes that was having issues, and they were to the point where she figured that she should have probably had the mother come in and talk about it rather than waiting for the parent-teacher conferences. So the mother came in with the little boy, and Colleen and her discussed what the little fellow was doing. And the mother looked down at the little boy and she said, "What's the matter with you? I told you Mrs. Krachek doesn't play." So, and she had a knack of being able to look at kids. She could see through them, as her son can attest to. She could read them by just looking at them. She knew what kind of day they were having. She met them on their own terms. And her teaching philosophy was that every child can learn. So, and as I was putting this little bit together here, I was looking at her, she had her graduation ribbons hanging on a mirror in our bedroom. And in '64, she graduated from Pius High School. In '94, 30 years later, she graduated from UW-Milwaukee. And then in 2002, she got her master's degree. So she was a woman with a mission, and the little people were her mission. So she was a tremendous teacher. She spent countless hours at Clark Street School. When she got her degree for teaching, she went for an interview at MPS, and she was told she would get a position. She had an interview with the principal at Clark Street School, and she was hired and given a classroom that same day. She came home, and she said, "This is a grand old school. wooden creaky floors, real blackboards, a smell of books, pencil shavings, and brand new crayons in the building. So it's just, our family is absolutely proud. And this is a tremendous award for her, and it will be put in our house in a prominent place. Thank you very, very much for this recognition.
Thank you. Superintendent, would you like to say a word?
Yes. Chair, President Peterson, members of the board, I can truly attest, I had the honor of working with Carlene Krachak for a number of years. And you talk about a champion for children. She was truly a champion for children. Even on holidays, when it was over the holiday break, whether we were out for Christmas or spring break, she found her way in for students who were non-readers or needed additional help in reading, and gave of her time and energy off of the clock to do just that. And I just say, on behalf of the district, just thank you. And it's an honor to be able to honor such a great person. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please. Madam Secretary, now what is the next item of business?
The next item is action on the minutes of the April and May 2021 special and regular meetings of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Do any members of the board have corrections for the minutes of April and May 2021? There being no corrections, the minutes are approved as printed. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the superintendent?
Yes, Mr. President, we have two communications from the superintendent. The first communication is the monthly report with possible action from the superintendent of schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the superintendent please present the report?
For my June report, one of the most exciting and gratifying events of June was that we were able to celebrate MPS graduation week for the class of 2021 in person. Our graduates, their families, and their staff deserve special congratulations for their perseverance during the pandemic. Please see my report for more information on our graduates, including a complete list of our valedictorians and salutatorians, as well as those students selecting historical Black colleges and universities. I am sure that you would agree that our class of 2021 graduates make us MPS proud. Congratulations are also in order for the Milwaukee High School of the Arts Jazz Ensemble for being recognized by Downbeat Magazine 44th National Student Music Award Competition for the 7th time. I will conclude my comments by encouraging all to review the information included in my report regarding the continued promotion of vaccinations and how families can conveniently get summer meals for their children. Thank you.
Committee, is there any questions, comments? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what is the next communication?
The next communication is the report with possible action regarding the Roadmap to Readiness Plan to return to in-person learning for the 2021-22 school year. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Superintendent, would you please
Pre-
present the report?
Yes, President Peterson and members of the board, this evening we're prepared to present the follow-up as requested by the board through its June 1st motion regarding the return to in-person learning for the 2021-2022 school year. I would once again like to thank the many individuals, staff, students, family, community members, the TEA, ASC, and the board for the many hours and great efforts that has been invested in planning efforts during the pandemic and moving forward with a plan for the 2021-2022 school year. At this time, I will ask Dr. Jennifer Smith, Dr. Carletta Nolan, and Mr. Eduardo Gavan to begin an overview of the Roadmap to Readiness report and update, and after which we will be more than happy to entertain any questions that you may have. Dr. Smith.
To face 5-day-a-week return to school for students for both August 2021 and September 2021 start dates. This report provides an update of the administration's planning that is aligned to the 9 parameters outlined in the June 1st action. This evening, we will follow the specific points of the June 1st motion to inform the board of specific plans resulting from the ongoing reopening work groups. In each motion item, we will refer to specific documents provided to the board with additional details supporting our plans.
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. I am Carletta Nolan, Regional Superintendent for the Central Region. Our first motion item is related to the instructional opportunities for the full in-person return in the fall of 2021. The feedback from the work groups and unions supports the board's directive to move away from concurrent teaching. However, the work groups also discussed how students who need to quarantine will be provided learning opportunities to continue their daily instruction. School-based teams will be created to identify school-wide practices and schedules that enable all students to access the general curriculum regardless of the time out of school. This will include clear expectations around one-to-one Chromebook usage and the use of Google Classroom, Seesaw, and other technology platforms that encourage and support learning. The school-based teams should also identify possible roles of support staff, such as the parent coordinator, paraprofessionals, SSTs, etc., in the learning opportunities for students. Motion item number 2 is related to sports and extracurricular activities. Milwaukee Public Schools is planning for a return of sports in the fall. Masks will not be required for outdoor sports. For indoor sports, masks will not be required while students are competing, but will be required while they are not competing. For example, while they're sitting on the bench. Sports programs will continue to adhere to appropriate health guidance for sport activities and spectators at all events. All fall high school sports are expected to resume. This includes football, cross country, girls volleyball, girls tennis, girls golf, girls swim, and boys soccer. For elementary and middle schools, full programming will be implemented during the fall 2021 season, which runs between mid-September until November. All extracurricular activities will resume with in-person options as well. Regarding motion item number 3, Milwaukee Public Schools continues to provide high-quality professional development for staff. Some of the professional development and tools available include social and emotional learning, SEL, practices to meet the needs of the school, including identifying and supporting vulnerable learners, youth mental health, first aid, trauma-sensitive classroom management. The social emotional health supports graphic 2.0, which is attached as an appendix in A. Culturally relevant and anti-racist resources will be shared with school leaders, support staff, and teachers to support students and the school community. Milwaukee Public Schools has created an anti-racism and biases professional development 3-year plan, which is attached as Attachment B. In Appendix B. The Professional Development Work Group has collaborated to identify topic areas for professional learning opportunities in the 2021-2022 school year. The work group also surveyed educators to further refine topic areas based on the feedback from educators through the survey. The professional development topic areas are outlined in the Phase 3 District Professional Development for Educators document, which is also as an appendix in C. And now I will turn it back to Dr. Jennifer Smith, Regional Superintendent for the high school region.
President Peterson, members of the board, Jennifer Smith, Regional Superintendent. Motion item 4 outlines the continuing commitment to implementing health and safety practices that adhere to guidance from the CDC, as well as from the Milwaukee Health Department. We acknowledge this adherence to public health guidance in the Roadmap to Readiness 2021-2022 school year update document and detailed the mitigation measures that are planned to be implemented for the fall. Feedback from families and other stakeholders for the spring 2021 expressed frustration that the safety guidelines implemented were not always aligned to current CDC recommendations for K-12 schools. The Milwaukee Health Department is now committed to aligning their guidance for schools with the CDC for clarity in reopening schools, and the MPS fall plans reflect the most current CDC guidelines. As we move to full in-person schooling on a daily basis, our goal is to have as many students and staff vaccinated as possible. To reach this goal outlined in motion item number 5, the district will need to communicate information related to the vaccine as well as opportunities for families to receive the vaccine. This work will rely on a close partnership between MPS, the Milwaukee Health Department, and a number of community groups. MPS will continue to offer facilities to support community vaccination efforts at sites known to and comfortable for our students and families. The district has committed to working with the Milwaukee Health Department on at least 2 additional vaccine opportunities for qualified students, staff, and community members. We will host the following events to encourage vaccinations prior to the start of the school year. There will be 2 back-to-school health fairs, one held at Obama SCTE on July 30th, and the other held at Longfellow School on August 6th. In addition to access to COVID-19 vaccines at the health fairs, families will have access to a variety of health services as well as other needed vaccinations. We will message these opportunities along with our ongoing vaccine clinics at the 5 MPS sites this summer. The district will ensure information about the COVID-19 vaccine benefits and availability to be easily accessible for students, staff, and families. To that end, the district will do the following: create advertising materials related to why vaccinate with a focus on peer-to-peer messaging. Use existing social media and communication platforms to get messages to students, staff, and families about the vaccine and its availability in our neighborhoods. And explore new avenues for communication to all stakeholders. Vaccination marketing efforts are outlined in the summer back-to-school marketing plan, which is attached as Appendix D in the roadmap plan. Motion item 6 expands the work of the communication group to gain feedback on best methods for reaching our MPS families and for ideas on welcome back to school and enrollment campaigns. The enrollment campaign will continue its We Are MPS Ready theme to inform potential families and students of the ways to enroll in Milwaukee Public Schools. Each school will hold at least one open house over the summer. The Department of Communications and Marketing will also support enrollment by collaborating with the Department of Student Services to seek out and register for in-person community events so that MPS can have a table or booth to promote enrollment. The Welcome Back to School campaign will highlight and inform families of the district procedures in place for a safe return to school. The Department of Communications and Marketing will coordinate with early and traditional start schools to prepare and host Day 1 celebrations. Messaging for both campaigns will be carried out through multiple methods, including billboards, television ads, radio ads, social media, community newspapers, and flyers posted at community locations. The full communications plan for the fall 2021 can be found in the summer back-to-school marketing plan, which is that Appendix D. I'll now turn it over to Mr. Galvan to present items 7 through 9.
Good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. I am Eduardo Galvan, Regional Superintendent for the Southwest Region, and I will begin with motion item 7. The administration, in response to motion number 7, as directed by the board, is recommending a full-time virtual program for children whose families prefer virtual learning for the 2021-2022 school year. The district has requested responses from families who would like their children to participate in the proposed virtual program by way of survey. Below are some of the important details about the MPS virtual program. Enrollment is limited and based on availability. Children will engage full-time learning through a program that serves only virtual learners. They will not be part of the classroom at their current school, and they will not lose their seat at their current school. The proposed virtual program will be a traditional program only. There will not be any specialty programs offered at this time, such as Montessori, language immersion, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, career and technical education, bilingual education. As a district in the process of transitioning back to the traditional face-to-face instructional environment, it is important to recognize that some students and families prefer an online learning platform. Therefore, rather than using traditional curriculum created for face-to-face instruction, the MPS virtual program will utilize a combination of curriculum that is created specifically for a virtual learning environment and district assessments that have been tailored specifically to align to MPS instructional standards. Using an e-learning content provider, the district will have the ability to offer courses that the district currently struggles to staff annually. Additionally, the administration recommends that the district not only partner with a third-party instructional e-learning content provider for educational services, but staffing as well. This will eliminate the need for our district's Human Resources Department to attempt to advertise, recruit, interview, and ultimately hire teaching staff for our virtual program in a very short time frame. In terms of item 8, the Department of Communications and Marketing worked with the Department of Procurement and Risk Management to draft requests for proposals, RFP, for marketing and public relations assistance. The Department of Procurement and Risk Management has issued the RFP and will follow the standard procedures in place for posting, reviewing, and awarding a contract under the RFP as directed in item 8. Finally, as outlined in item 9, work group meetings have continued their regular meetings. The work groups have expanded when necessary to gather the input of additional stakeholders, including experts or professionals outside of MPS and student voice. Each work group team is composed of principals, teachers, support staff, parents, and community members. Work group co-chairs have a list of all attendees and topics of discussion for each work group. Meeting dates and supporting documentations can be found on the reopening plan site. The administration has engaged in meet and confer discussions with union groups. Specifically, the administration has met with the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association, MTEA, Administrator and Supervisors Council, ASC, Psychologists Association in Milwaukee Public Schools, PAMPS, and Local 420 International Union of Operating Engineers. At these sessions, the administration outlined the fall reopening plan and addressed any questions from the unions. Specific discussions were held on the following topics: COVID testing, contact testing, quarantine protocols, mitigation strategies, cleaning protocols, virtual programming. The Roadmap to Readiness 2021-2022 school year update document provides more information on the district's plan to return to in-person learning 5 days a week, expanding on the presentation given at the special board meeting on June 1st, 2021. At this time, we are prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
And before we turn it back over, I just would like to go through the survey breakdown as of 6/24/2020, 2021 at 5:15 p.m. We have a total of kindergarten through K3 through K5. The number of students that want to be in that particular program is 119. First through fifth grade is 461. Sixth through eighth grade is 335. 9 through 12th grade is 500. So with a grand total of 1,415 students that we will be making accommodations for. All of the students and staff students and families that have submitted surveys, we have also gone back through and made a call to each one of the families to let them know that, like Mr. Gavan said, that there will be any specialty type of program. It will be a regular education program. And are you still interested? And we have the numbers out of the group. 35 of those families changed their mind. However, that is our final number as of today. We're still awaiting some of the mail-in. So some mail-in surveys are still trickling in. Thank you.
Thank you, administration, for that information. At this point, I'd like to ask board members to first ask questions of clarification before maybe making comments about something you may or may not disagree with, just so we can all be clear on certain things. So if any board member has a question to clarify or deepen our understanding of the program, please raise your hand. Okay, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. In the attachment, the budget estimate said it was based on an enrollment of 1,000 students. So then would we be able to extrapolate from the increase in numbers that you just told us that there would be an increase in that budget estimate? And I was also curious if that is, it says includes 6 courses per semester per student. So is that number, that 500,000, is that for one semester or is that for a whole year?
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, that is for a whole year. The number that we landed with was the 1,000 because at that particular time we had the 777 that appears in your documents. And so we based it off of 1,000, also working to go up if we need to go up. And so right now we're at 1,415.
Okay.
And that's for a year.
For a year. Other questions of clarification? Dr. Simpson.
Thank you, President Peterson. I know last year when we were coming back to in-person, there were some sessions that families could attend to ask questions, get information. I'm thinking, you know, there might be families moving into the district. There might be families who just aren't tuned in right now. Is there, do you foresee maybe offering some sessions for families closer to our start date where there can be some dialogue for questions that they may have closer to that time?
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, yes. One of the groups that, one of the 5 groups has to work with parent and professional development for parents as well as for staff. And one of the things, they are going to continue to meet throughout the summer, looking at any avenues that we may need to look at. But yes, we're looking at what needs to happen there. Also, we talked about each one of the school communities each school community has to give us a plan of how they're going to stay in contact with their families over the summer, whether that's phone calls, emails, and then also looking at postcards or whatever the situation may be. But also looking at have one session coming in so that they will have some type of open house at their school campus, but also keeping us abreast of what is needed and anything that we see that's needed with new families coming in, they will be coming to the Office of Student Services, and Mr. Boswell will be able to track that number and to see how we need and what we need to do around that. So absolutely looking at anything that, if there's situations around vaccinations and things of this nature, that we see that arises, we will address that. But they also have some basic things that they have identified that we will already be addressing around how to, what to do and what to look for the upcoming school year.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Vice Chair Taylor.
Thank you, President Peterson. I didn't see it, but I know since things are somewhat going back to normal, we'll never probably get back to normal. Will we still be occupying or having a space for students that may possibly not feel well? I don't want to say have COVID because we wouldn't know necessarily, but will we have a space assigned for that?
Superintendent.
For President Peterson, members of the board, I did not catch the last part of your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm gonna move closer. Is that better? Can you hear me
Yes.
now? Okay. For this school year, we had a place that would have been designated for those who may be experiencing COVID symptoms. Will we still have something as such for the next school year or the upcoming school year?
President Peterson, members of the board, the answer is yes.
Dr. Herndon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question is related to children getting their vaccines. As of late, there's a lot of information out that not enough children that are eligible are getting their vaccines. Are there any additional plans in place? Thank you. Do you have additional plans in terms of encouraging parents to get their children vaccinated, as that would be very important as we try to open back up? Thank you.
President Peterson, members of the board, yes, we have a number of different plans, and you will see that in that marketing plan. We just come off of having 4 of our sites designated for clinics, and then we have been working with the Milwaukee Health Department, and there's 2 more that we're going to be doing right away very soon, and then we're going to constantly be talking in communication with the health department, because we've been told that right now is from 12 and up, but that number should go down a little lower than that, we understand. So we are staying in touch with the health department so that we will be able to make that offer, as well as the state is working on a plan to be able to help us with that as well, with a lot of the local pharmacists around the city. So we are still going back and forth to try to make sure that we stay on the cutting edge of new information that's coming out, so that we give all of our families and our children that opportunity. And that's one of the things that we're going to push is vaccinations.
Other questions? Yes, Director Gokul-Gandhi.
I was wondering if you could walk me through the flexible scheduling protocol. So say one student tests positive in one classroom. Does that mean that classroom moves to flexible scheduling? And then what happens when 3% of the population of the school tests positive? How many days would we move to flexible scheduling? And then what does the return of a student after they've tested positive look like?
Administration.
Director Peterson, members of the board. So for a child who would have a confirmed case of COVID-19, we would use the true definition of close contacts in order to determine who would need to quarantine based on their vaccination status and the symptoms they are displaying. That would be determined on a case-by-case basis by the contact tracers. We will continue to work in close communication with the Milwaukee Health Department around current protocols for determining the number of days and who needs to quarantine based on each case. As far as the 3%, if 3% of the school population would be positive at one given time, that would be a 14-day move to virtual instruction.
Okay. Any follow-up? Other questions? Yes, Director O'Halloran.
To piggyback off of that question, then, for someone who is fully vaccinated and not displaying symptoms, if the whole school reaches that 3%, which I know is very unlikely given the efficacy of vaccines, would that student then still be required? I'm just trying to think, because my understanding is somebody who is vaccinated, who is not displaying symptoms, does not need to quarantine. So if a whole school, though, goes to flexible scheduling, would that child, regardless of that status, then be expected to do the flexible scheduling?
Administration.
President Peterson, members of the board, we would work in very close contact with the health department. Guidelines are constantly changing, and so while we say, now that's our would be our protocol, I think the health department is looking at each individual case and definitely looking at vaccination status, and individuals, even if they would be a close contact, if they're vaccinated and not showing symptoms, may not have to quarantine, but we would work and definitely follow the direction of the health department on that issue.
President Peterson, members of the board, and right now the guidelines in that situation, that child or that adult would not have to quarantine because if they are not symptomatic. So we will be following, and we made it clear in our plan that we will be following CDC guidelines as well as the health department guidelines, because the health department is going to come in compliance with the CDC guidelines.
Director O'Halloran.
And at the previous, I think it was the June 1st meeting, I had asked if we were able to build the capacity to track if someone was vaccinated, and I think there was a question if we were going to seek clarification from our attorneys. Were we able to get that clarification?
President Peterson and members of the board, we are not able to get that information. We have information, we don't have the information of neither do we have it on adults that have been vaccinated. We do not have that information. And what we were able to gather is that we would not be able to get that information.
Okay. Dr. Leonard.
So a little bit change of topic. This one's regarding transportation. What is our current status on where we stand with bus drivers before we even get out of the gates, so to speak?
President Peterson and members of the board, David Solifer is making his way to the mic, and I will share with you that I just witnessed the bus companies at Juneteenth on Saturday all over the place finding clipboards. I actually signed up as one of the drivers, and I was I got to take this off. And so, but I do know that they are out there, they are everywhere looking for drivers. David, go ahead.
President Peterson, members of the board, David Solik, Fife-Eric, Director of Business Transportation Services. All of our contracts are executed as of tonight. Of course, we're finalizing a few, and the attraction and retention is not starting today, but that kind of puts some closure to some of the last pieces of the driver labor pool discussion. And with summer school going on right now in the next 2 months, that's really the push. And so the push for us is to make sure that we have adequate drivers and equipment. We are planning for above and beyond what the need is, obviously for items such as social distancing and the like. So I'm confident that what will very likely occur is that we're going to have a sufficient amount and then some. We are also contracting out for what we call non-traditional transportation alternatives, human service vehicles, diversifying the fleets, if you will, so that we can provide flexible options if we need to pivot in specific directions. But very confident that the next 2 months are going to lead us in that direction. There are some challenges. Those challenges deal more with unemployment and things that are completely out of our control as it pertains to workforce development and the ability for people to remain on unemployment. But we're all hands on deck, and of course, each of these companies are well aware of their contracted amount and are doing what they can, obviously, to make sure that they have the appropriate labor supply.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi, and then I'm going to ask some questions.
This might be a silly question. I just wanted to ask for clarification. So we are allowed to ask for other immunization records, correct, for when children come to school?
Administration?
President Peterson and members of the board, yes, we are, and this is, COVID-19 is not one of them. So at this time, COVID-19 is not one.
Okay,
And I believe that's a state decision,
Yeah.
not a local schools board decision.
I see. Okay.
That's right. Could I give the gavel over to Vice Chair Taylor?
Director Peterson.
Yes, just a few questions. You mentioned the 5 vaccine sites this summer. Do we know what those sites are?
Administration.
Chair Peterson and members of the board,
President Peterson, members of the board, it was North Division, South Division, Morris, Rogers Street, and I'm blanking on the last one, but Dr. Cotton is going to help me.
Morris, did you say Morris?
Morris, Rogers Street.
And Roosevelt.
Roosevelt, thank you.
Director Peterson.
Yes. One of the questions that has been raised by some around the virtual program is our ability to find a vendor who is going to be has enough certified staff. And could you just comment on that? We know that this is a short-term thing. It's not going to go beyond 1 year, I would anticipate, and maybe shorter if students continue to come back to school. But obviously, we want to make sure that we have we're contracting with a company that has adequately staffed their ranks so that they can serve us well.
Administration.
Vice President Taylor, members of the board, yes, we have been in conversations with companies that will be able to offer synchronous and asynchronous instruction, looking at the balance of where we need to be. And we have follow-up discussions coming up in regards of trying to get that balance where we need it to be, the 60-40 or 50-50 blend, and also looking at how, as a district, we provide some of the additional support around that particular program as well, from a district standpoint.
Director Peterson.
Has there been any discussion of how or when families will be able to move their students from a virtual setting to a face-to-face setting?
Administration.
Vice President Taylor, members of the board, that is one of the things that we have had constantly dialogue about. We've had the conversation about a term. We've had the conversation about a quarter, had this conversation about a semester. But at the end of the day, our goal is to make sure that we meet the needs of our students and our families. So if a family comes to us and say, we want to move back to in-person, our goal is to move them back to in-person. So we want to have intervals of time, but sometimes that doesn't work out that way. Our goal is to meet the family's need.
Director Peterson.
To move to COVID testing, could you talk about what the current plans are and contrast them, say, with what we have done this spring?
Administration.
Vice President Taylor, members of the board, this past spring we had surveillance testing, and we worked with a company and worked with 2 companies, one company that provided the test, as well as another company that provided the staff to go in to administer the test. And so that is the process with surveillance testing. What we have learned through the conversations from the various groups and community groups and is the idea we need to do something with symptomatic students, more of a rapid test type of situation, based only on a parent's consent to be able to do that. And we are looking at that particular piece. We're also working with the state around various programs around what that program will look like, what type of rapid test, who will administer the rapid test, how do they drop it off, when will it be administered, and all of those kinds of things is things that we're still working on internally to make sure that we are ready for day one.
Just
Director
one
Peterson?
follow-up is, might it be, are we hoping to include our nurses in that procedure?
Administration, please.
Vice President Taylor, members of the board, one of the things that have come out in our meet and confer with our various unions is the idea of there's been conversations around having school nurses to cover that for the upcoming school year. So that is kind of where we are right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. The gavel is being passed back.
Other questions? I see Matt
Chason.
Chason over there, and Matt, you may speak.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Matt Chason, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. Other districts in the state of Wisconsin, even before COVID, were using the opportunity to virtualize education to open enroll kids from hundreds of miles away. And I wanted to make sure that we were aware of that fact so that we don't prematurely discount or divest from interests or investments we've made to support some virtualization. There may be a strategic opportunity worth pursuing there. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns beyond questions? If Director O'Halloran.
I know, I just have so many questions. So I just thought it was perfect. The first email I read today was in all caps that we absolutely should not be wearing masks. And then the next one was not capitalized, but it was bolded. And we should absolutely be wearing masks. And I thought it was perfect because it encompasses just people's feelings. And I'm pretty middle of the road. So just for people's understanding, is it just, will the decision be made by CDC when the CDC says it, or is that something that we anticipate as we see like our vaccine rates in Milwaukee or the Milwaukee Health Department? I am not advocating one way or another. I think people just want to know if we have a feeling for when decisions would be made.
Administration.
President Peterson, members of the board, our health and safety work group has discussed the criteria that we would use, when it would be appropriate to have the conversation about ending masks. We came to the decision and have discussed it with the Milwaukee Health Department, and they support that decision that we wouldn't enter into a conversation about criteria to end masks until vaccination was available to all of our children. And so at that time when all school-age children could be vaccinated, we would look at a number of factors, including vaccination rate, rate of infection in our community, and take all of that into consideration to determine when it might be safe to end our mask wearing.
President Peterson and members of the board, I would also like to add that I've been getting flooded with emails on a daily basis about masks and wearing masks, and mostly not wearing masks. And I just think it is something that we are going to have to deal with sooner than later. And it will be back before us very soon, I'm sure. And I was just out at a summer school site on yesterday, and the children are taking frequently mask breaks, staff are taking mask breaks, so they're outside, and I was standing at the door, and they ripping those masks off, and just jetting out the door like, wow. So, and I just think that that is something that is going to be coming our way, and that is something that we will be addressing, I'm sure, sooner than later.
Any other comments? Yes, Director Gokul Gandhi.
To Mr. Chason's point, are we looking into ramping up our virtual programming to make that a sustainable option even as hopefully COVID becomes irrelevant to our community?
President Peterson, members of the board, one of the things that I will say, the answer would be yes, but one of the things I would say, we already have a virtual program within our district, 6 through 12. The reason we had to go back and go kindergarten through 12th grade because we did not have a program that will meet the needs of our students in the early grades. But yes, we're looking at that, looking at the enrollment opportunities around that, but there is going to have to take, we're going to keep this group together working on that as we go forward. The state DPI gave a waiver for this year. However, we want to engage more of our stakeholders in what that will look like as we move forward. But the answer is yes.
Yeah, Director Gokul Gandhi.
Yeah, and I think if the number continues to hover around 1,000, I think what I worry about is the offering for AP, IB, CTE education. Just because a child is virtual, I don't think that they should miss out on those options, and I think that's an equity issue. So I think something as we continue to talk about, if next year we still have 1,000 some students asking for virtual learning, I think we need to then find a way to incorporate some of those offerings into virtual programming.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, no more comments. That is fine. Sort of surprise, but that's great. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Board Governance?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have two communications. And the first communication is our legislative activity. Yes, this is an information item, and I'll possible action. No action is required. Mr. President, Mr. Chris Gill.
Okay, go ahead.
President Peterson, members of the board, Chris Thiel, Legislative Policy Manager, Office of Board Governance. It's been an interesting month, and the primary activity, as you know, at the state level is the final stages of the state budget process. But the beginning of this month opened with the Wisconsin Policy Forum taking a look at the revenue estimates for the state and describing the revenue that has come in as a golden opportunity. And I think it's important to think about this opportunity this month through the budget process and possibly going forward. Because as the Wisconsin Policy Forum laid out, if you've been around state politics, if you've been around education policy, we've had any number of discussions about how to improve the state's K-12 funding system. We have reports on the shelves. We have ready policy that we could implement. And as the Wisconsin Policy Forum pointed out, with the revenue available, we could go ahead and take some of those opportunities, implement those things, and move forward. Where we are, however, with the state budget is that the Joint Finance Committee wrapped up its work a week ago Thursday. And the budget that is now going to the floor of the Assembly first and then the Senate is one that is really extraordinary in terms of the history of the state and specifically probably the history of this moment. We had a press conference at the beginning of this week where we were joined by Congresswoman Moore, where she described what's going on at the state level as a shell game. The fact is, as we've discussed, that we sometimes talk about Wisconsin's funding system as a property tax limitation system that kind of acts as an education funding system. And as we have read the reports over the last several weeks about the concerns of maintenance of effort and making sure that we're able to receive the federal funds, we know that at the end of last month, the action that the Joint Finance Committee took failed the test. And immediately after that action was taken, the Department of Education issued a letter to the state of Wisconsin saying, you are not in compliance with maintenance of effort. So we had a number of weeks where we were in that limbo. And just to be clear, we are only one of two states that received that notification. Wisconsin and Texas were in violation of maintenance of effort for that period of time. At the time, you may remember that the Joint Finance Committee put $350 million in the motion that they passed. And they said it was for K-12 education or for any other purpose. So in essence, it wasn't for K-12 education, and the Department of Education at the federal level identified that and cited them as being out of compliance and that they would need to put additional funds into K-12 education as they had agreed to, because it's the Joint Finance Committee that took the step of agreeing to the maintenance of effort requirement. This committee is the one that agreed to hold up its end of the bargain. But what they did on Thursday is they put state aid into the formula without lifting the revenue limit. And when you do that, you're not funding schools, you're lowering property taxes. We still don't have final verification that they've met the maintenance of effort requirement. It seems at this point that they have, based on the interpretation from the state's Legislative Fiscal Bureau. Both Congresswoman Moore and Congressman Pocan have been inquiring with the Department of Ed to make sure that we're eligible to receive the federal funds, despite the fact that it's clear to everyone that this shell game, again, to quote Congresswoman Moore, is being played. So Congressman Pocan actually had a moment in a committee meeting today with the Secretary of Education, and the Secretary of Education is responding to his office. So we may have another update, but it seems that at this point that that's where we are. What's further extraordinary is that the state has a system where it has a rainy day fund. And when there are additional revenues, there's a calculation that the state has to meet to put money in this rainy day fund, which, for all is a reasonable thing to do. But what has happened, and what I believe is unprecedented, is that the Joint Finance Committee has decided, on top of that rainy day fund, to just kind of put on the shelf $550 million. The $350 million that we heard about at the Joint Finance Committee. And then on Thursday, they added $200 million to that and just kind of hid it under the mattress, in essence. Even though we know that we have all of these needs. Traditionally, when this funding system that we now have was invented, you would see a per pupil increase that rose with the rate of inflation. Over time, that's pretty much been a $200 per pupil increase. With that $550 million, you could certainly provide a $200 per pupil increase across the state of Wisconsin and continue to meet the 2/3 requirement that they've talked about that they passed with their action. With that funding, it appears that there's also enough in the second year of the biennium to put funding toward students with disabilities to increase the reimbursement rate to 50%. So we have sitting on the shelf right now still an opportunity. The budget process isn't over. It's very clear that when the Joint Finance Committee finishes its work, that's usually the budget that we will see go to the floor and be passed by the Assembly and the Senate, but there is an amendment opportunity in both of those chambers. And then beyond that, I think the question is going to be, what opportunity does the governor have with his veto pen? How can he make some changes, as he did 2 years ago, if possible, to provide additional funding to K-12 education? Or do we have an opportunity to really take a look at some of the budget items that Joint Finance has put forward through that equity lens? Because right now, some of the tax cut pieces are going to the higher income levels. They're not targeted in areas that they could be, and/or used for education if we saw fit. So the question will be, will we see amendments? What will they give to the governor? How will the governor use his veto pen? And then after that, will we still have funds available that we can talk about heading into the fall? And frankly, will those funds still be there as we head toward the next election? There's precedent for that. We saw that in January of 2020, where there was kind of a standoff between tax cut and special education funding. But I guess the message is we still have an opportunity, and the best scenario for K-12 education is to keep that opportunity around as long as possible and continue to fight for that. So happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Committee members, would you have a question or comment? Director O'Halloran.
Thank you, President Peterson. Just a simple question. The federal funds, were those for COVID relief, or were those intended to fund the state's responsibility for operation of schools?
Those were, Director Peterson, Director O'Halloran, those were dedicated to help school districts, specifically with COVID relief. They were not intended to be used as funds for regular budgetary purposes.
Thank you. I just wanted to make that clear because it seems like some people are unclear. They see this large number and they think, well, why should we continue to, uphold the state's responsibility to educate children if they already have money? And it is so frustrating. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir to everyone in this room, because that's the state's responsibility. And the federal government told us we cannot use that money to fund our operations for like whatever we think, we can't substitute those funds. So I just want to make it clear, if there's anybody who is listening who said, well, I heard about all this money that MPS is getting, why do they need more? Well, we need more because it's a one-time fund and it's not intended to fund our general operations that the state is supposed to be funding. So I just want to make that clear for everyone listening.
Thank you very much. Any comment, Mr. Steele?
Director Peterson, I would only comment that Director O'Halloran is right. There really is no argument about this, whether it's urban school districts, rural school districts, suburban school districts. There is a reliance on the state doing its part. There is a reliance when you have business managers across the state in 421 school districts having a predictable, sustainable funding system. And the fact that that is not going to happen is in itself creating a funding cliff for those districts. And I don't think I've ever heard business managers and superintendents across the state speak so directly about how detrimental this decision will be and how negatively it will impact their school districts. South Milwaukee, again, I think I will point to them as being a leader among others. They held a press conference as well on Tuesday after the one that was held here. And the St. Francis, Cudahy, South Milwaukee school districts, everyone around us is pointing out to their legislators just what the impact will be and how negative it will be. If I could, we talk about the fact that we're going to hear big dollar figures, and then there's only a very small, in the history of the state funding system for K-12 education, amount of funding actually that is usable for schools. $112 million. The bulk of that money really is going to go toward trying to meet the promise they made 2 years ago to get to a 30% reimbursement rate. So unfortunately, even that dollar amount is kind of a keep your head above water amount that was already falling short of the promise that we heard 2 years ago. So we can give more detail going forward. And again, I do think I want to really thank again Congressman Moore, Congressman Porcan, Representative Goyke, Senator LaTanya Johnson for all of their efforts, everyone else for all their efforts, the advocacy that we've seen and the partners that we always talk about. People have really been advocating with the Big Five, led by Superintendent Posley, coming out and really clearly communicating. I think all those efforts have been important. We're hopeful that the governor has some opportunity with what's put before him. But I do think it may be worth keeping as much revenue in place as we head into the fall so that we can keep these discussions going. So thank you again.
Thank you. I'd like to pass the gavel and just say a few words.
Director Peterson.
Thank you. One thing I noticed at the end of the press conference here on the front steps, Congresswoman Moore did mention that the other issue that she's very concerned about and amazed at is that instead of the legislature deciding to provide health care to 90,000 more people, we turned down Medicare expansion, and at the cost of $1.5 or $6 billion that the state would have also received. And just not to preach to the choir, as was said, but there's been a whole battery of other legislation, whether it's on voting rights or prohibiting schools to teach about systemic racism or funding for African-American farmers, you name it, they're coming up with it. And it's just a reminder that we live in a political world, education is political, and it's not just education issues which affect our children and families, because their cuts in social services, their refusal to expand Medicaid hurts our families. And so we have to stand on, hopefully all of us stand on those issues as well with the people, as opposed to with a few Republican legislators. Thank you.
That was past that.
Any other comments? Okay. Are there any other communications from the Office of Board Governance?
Yes, Mr. President, the next communication is action on a request to retire to closed session to confer with legal counsel with respect to litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved. The recommendation is that the board retire to closed session in order to confer with legal counsel.
Thank you. If there are no objections from our committee, from the board, we will defer this item until the end of the meeting, and so we can conduct the rest of the meeting. Seeing no objections, Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have one communication from the Office of OAE, and that is the monthly report. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Okay. Would the Office of Accountability and Efficiency wish, please present the report?
Yes, thank you, Director Peterson. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. So that item contains both our regular monthly report and our fiscal year 2022 annual work plan, in which you can find a summary of some of our FY 2021 accomplishments, and as they relate to and reside within our multi-year strategic plan, which extends through fiscal year 2029. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Does the board wish to ask any questions? Make any comments? Yes, Dr. Leonard, thank you.
I had the opportunity to look at that strategic plan. I like strategic plans. It gives you a nice, clear idea of where you should be going, and you can measure if you're doing the right thing or you're not, if you're getting the success that you need. It definitely adds a lot of value both to their effectiveness and the district's effectiveness as a whole. I do believe that our district is moving in that same direction. At least that's my hope. So I'm looking forward to working in collaboration with everybody on a plan as well. Just want to put that comment in there, and I thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Madam Secretary.
Standing committees. Would you like me to read into the record the first report?
Yes, please.
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 2, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, the salary increases and decreases, and the limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside at the request of Director O'Halloran.
Okay, do any board members wish any other items be set aside from that committee? I see no hands raised. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Legislation, Rules, and Policies. Item 2, action on a technical amendment to Board Rule 1.02. Regular board meetings has been set aside and will be held over one cycle pursuant to Board Rule 1.11 on the amendments to the board rule.
Thank you. Do any board members wish any other items to be set aside from the LRP committee? Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. No items of this report has been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside from this committee? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. No items of this report has been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside from this committee? Seeing none now, I ask for a motion and action on a motion for the balance of the reports of the standing committees. Director Simpson.
I move that we accept the rest of the reports. The
Do I have a
standing
second
committees.
for that motion? Director Taylor. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
On Director Simpson's motion to approve the balance of the reports, seconded by Vice President Taylor. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul-Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson?
Aye.
Director Taylor? Aye. And Chair Peterson?
Aye.
That's 9 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what is the next item?
The next item of business is action on the items that have been set aside. Mr. President, we are now back to the 2 items that have been set aside. Item number 2 from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, and in the reassignments and reclassifications of salary increases and decreases in the limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days.
Okay. Madam Secretary, if there are no objections, given that this item was noticed for possible executive session, I would ask that we defer that item to the end of this agenda. Any objections? So we'll move forward. Madam Secretary, what is the next item set aside?
The next item that was set aside on tonight's agenda would be the item from the communication from the Office of Board Governance to retire into closed session on litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved.
Okay, and we can set that aside. I mean, we can push that to be included in our other executive sessions at the end of this meeting. Is that correct?
So noted.
Okay. So, are there any additional reports or before the board?
Yes, Mr. President, we are to the regular items of business, and there are 2 items of regular business. The first one is the report of the board's delegates. The first report is that of the board's delegate to the District Advisory Council, the Title I District Advisory Council.
Okay.
Thank you, President Peterson. That report is before you, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Okay, Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The next report is that of the board's delegate to the Head Start Policy Council.
And that is from?
Actually, we got that mixed up, so that's okay. So that's okay. So the report is before you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Secretary, what is the next item of regular business?
The next item of regular business is the report of the president of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
That's also before you, and that's, if there's any questions, let me know. Madam Secretary, are there any items of unfinished business?
Mr. President, we have no items of unfinished business.
Do we have any items of new business for referral to committee?
We have no items of new business for referral.
Madam Secretary, are there any communications for referral to committee?
Mr. President, we have no communications this month for referral to committee.
Madam Secretary, are there any resolutions for referral to committee?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have 2 resolutions for referral to committee. The first resolution is Resolution 2122R-006 by Director Carr on recognition of Juneteenth Day.
Okay, that resolution will be referred to the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel.
So noted.
Is there another resolution?
The next resolution is Resolution 2122R-007 by Director Leonard on a charter school evaluation.
That resolution will be referred to the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. Madam Secretary, what's the next item?
The next item, Mr. President, we are now back to the 2 items that have been deferred to the end of the meeting. Communication number 2 from the Reports and Communications from the Office of Board Governance, which is action on a request to retire to closed session to confer with legal counsel with respect to litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved. And item number 2 from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments and reclassifications, salary increases or decreases, and the limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days.
Madam Secretary, as both of these items were noticed for executive session and to avoid having to go in and out of closed sessions, I will entertain a motion to consider these items together. Director O'Halloran, seconded by Director Taylor. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the motion.
I move we retire into executive session and consider the items together.
Thank you so much. Thank you for saying it for the listening audience. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll on that motion?
On Director O'Halloran's motion to retire to executive session to consider both items, seconded by Vice President Taylor.
Yes.
Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor. And Chair Peterson.
Aye. Now, at this time, don't
You
get
have
up yet. I will
9
accept,
ayes, the motion passes.
I will accept a motion to retire to closed session. We just previously put the two things together. And pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851G, which allows a government body to go into closed session to confer with legal counsel concerning strategy to be adopted by the board with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, and Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, which allows a governmental body to go into closed session to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Does any member so move that? Director Gokul Gandhi and Director O'Halloran, seconding. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
On Director Gokul Gandhi's motion to retire into executive session on communication number 2 from the Office of Board Governance and item number 2 from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, seconded by Director O'Halloran. On the motion as read, Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor. Aye. President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
The board will now retire to executive session pursuant to the statutes that I previously referenced. The board will return to open session to continue its discussion and take action. Madam Secretary, please note the time.
So noted.
I don't.
So are we waiting to log in or? This meeting of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors is back in session. The board has been in closed session. Is there any additional discussion? Okay, well, what is the pleasure of the board with respect to the items discussed in closed session? Director O'Halloran, please, the first item.
Thank you, President Peterson. Relative to item number 2 of the AFP committee, I move approval of the administration's recommendation.
Any discussion on that item? Seeing no discussion?
Second.
Oh, we'll have a second, Director Taylor. Now, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the administration's recommendation relative to action on recommended administrative appointments, seconded by Vice President Taylor. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor. Aye. And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran, do you have something to say about that motion that we just passed?
I sure do.
do you
To all
say?
the people who have just received an appointment or promotion, I just want to say thank you and congratulations and go forth and do great things.
Thank you. Now, I believe there's one other item that we want to address. Would somebody like to introduce that?
Yes, Mr. President, the item that the board considered in closed session would be the reports and communications from the Office of Board Governance. Action on a request to retire to closed session to confer with legal counsel with respect to litigation in which the board is or is likely to become involved.
Director O'Halloran.
Yes, I move to approve the settlement agreement relative to ERD case number CR 202000703 as presented to the board in closed session.
Is there a second? Director Carr. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the settlement agreement relative to ERD case number CR 2020-00703 as presented to the board in closed session. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor. Aye. And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. Chair, that was the last item on tonight's agenda.
Therefore, given there's no business, this meeting is adjourned.
Stop the recording. Turn off.